Alright, the new king of PvE has arrived, the Apocalypse Navy. Now the Navy battleships are very interesting, they offer fantastic tank, but they also offer some fantastic DPS. Now the Apocalypse line of ships is known for their long range capabilities, basically they're excellent snipers, they have some very nice alpha damage and some very nice DPS, and this ship here is going to be, I would say, quite fun to test out because it combines the tank of the Abaddon and basically combines the effectiveness of the Apocalypse Striker. So basically it almost does act like a Marauder, or it almost acts like the Paladin. So let's take a look at the ship trait description. Almost plus 10% large laser activation time, minus 10% damage control reactivation delay, plus 10 seconds damage control activation time. Okay, pretty good. And I would say standard for the Navy ships. Now, in order to take advantage of the skill per level bonuses, you have to have the expert skills. These ships are quite skill heavy because it takes a while to actually get the expert skills to the maximum, but we get some nice tracking, nice DPS, and nice range, as well as some scan resolution and sensor strength. Now the Apocalypse Navy has 2 drones, 8 high slots, 4 medium slots, 6 low slots, 3 combat, and 3 engineering rigs. And well, if we take a look at the resistance values, they are kinda insane. The Apocalypse Navy is primarily a armor tank. It has some terrifying, I mean, just look at these numbers, they are wild. I am going to be able to create some pretty tanky ships with these stats, and that's going to be fun to do. Now the Apocalypse is known to have one of the best capacitors in the game, and this ship is no exception. I would say definitely one of the best capacitors out of any battleship in the game. Will last quite a while in combat. However, the Apocalypse Navy is not the fastest. It's actually quite on the chunky side. It's really not the fastest. Although at the same time, I wouldn't say that it's the slowest, but you know, it's on the slower side. Now this is the current build that I have. 1612 DPS with the C-type large pulsators, 54.81 km is the optimal range, actual of 7.25, and tracking 10.44, which is pretty good. In the medium slots, standard dual webs, scrambler, and a Nosferatu. In the low slots, dual repairers, dual adaptives, damage control, and a afterburner. 70, 77, 77, and 75% resistance on the armor. This is, by the way, cold in the station. And it has 433,000 hit points. Now, when we go to the nanocore window here, you have a lot of nanocores to choose from. You also have the, well, you also have the new Weeb nanocore that does look very nice on the ship. They said that they will be changing the aesthetics of the Weeb nanocore, mostly because you can't really see the character well. It does work really well on the capital ships and on some battleships, and on the Apocalypse it does look really good. But you know they can still improve it. I can barely see the character on this enormous tablet. But you also have a bunch of other nanocores, and I mean the Apocalypse has a lot of them. You really have a lot of nanocores to choose from. Now my personal recommendation would be to go for the blue or green nanocore if you are light on ISK. If you have time to grind, then I would suggest that you go get the Concord Pass nanocore. It does get the job done. But you also, if you want, of course, completely optional, you can also get some of the other nanocores that are a bit more expensive. That is up to player preference, but I personally use blue, green, or Concord Pass nanocores. I rarely buy nanocores. I did buy the Weeb nanocore just because of the memes. I promised that I'd do that, and well, since I like to keep my words, I did it for the memes. So yeah, that's the nanocore that I bought recently on the RB. But on the Apocalypse, you really have a lot of very easy to obtain nanocores. And well, now onto the wild part, the rig. So I'll show you the cheap build, the more expensive build, because that's what I like to do. I focused this apocalypse on maximum resistance, and I also focused on some armor repair. Here you can take a look at integrations and at the rigs that are integrated, and in the engineering rigs I have capacitor rigs, the classic. And well, the result is a very, very chunky apocalypse. Now, for the implants we have three options: pulse crystal, focus crystal, and the thermal circulation. Now, since the first build will be based on the tank, the thermal circulation is, I would say, universally the best implant in the game right now, because it does work on literally all armor tanks, because that passive extra armor resistance is going to affect literally all ships. It also affects the pod. 76, 81, 82, and 80%. I think I did give this ship a bit too many resistances, although you can't go wrong with extra tank.
Undocking.
Extra tank is always helpful, although this is a very tanky boat. I mean, these ships are so tanky, it's ridiculous. Can easily rival the Abaddon in terms of tank, and it can also out DPS the Abaddon, which is kind of insane when you think about it. These ships are really something special and something different, and I love them. Although I don't fly them myself that often, they're still excellent in the hands of the right pilot. Now let me quickly adjust the modules as usual, because the game just likes to torture me this way, but I got used to it by now. So yeah, I'll just quickly readjust the modules so that it looks nice, you know. There we go. Okay, that looks nice and clean. Perfect. Alright, so let's turn on the adaptives. Now, I'm kinda scared to look at the stats because I don't know, I think I created the monster 808. Oh my god, 88, 90, 90, and 90%. A brick. This is a brick. This is tanky. Now this is tanky. I love it. It has some mobility as well. It can move around with the afterburner. It is almost capacitor stable, and it is insane how tanky it is. Truly a monster of a ship. Now the siege mode is the classic siege mode that you see on the strikers. Basically the exact same bonus. 2411.10 DPS for a monster tank. I have no complaints about this. So far so good. And with the damage control, you also get the bonus on damage control, by the way. On the duration, 96, 97, 97, and 97. 2.3 million hit points. Lovely. The damage will last 23 seconds, and the cooldown is 135 seconds. Yeah, that's going to be... this gives you basically immortality for 23 seconds. More than enough time to basically win a battle.
Docking
Because
request
those
accepted.
20 seconds are going to be extremely important. Now you can ditch the afterburner or micro overdrive and do something like this. Triple adaptives with damage control and dual armor repairs. Now this is a build that you would mostly see on an Abaddon. And because this thing is so tanky, it has so much base armor resistance,
Undocking.
you can easily you can easily use the Apocalypse Navy like the Abaddon because of the amount of tankage you can get out of this thing. So you can easily do something like this, and it does rival the Abaddon now in terms of how tanky it can get. 141,000 hit points, 90, 92, 92, and 92%. You know, this thing is just wild. I almost have no words to describe the Apocalypse Navy. It's a pretty wild ship, honestly. And you also have some pretty scary stats when the damage
Docking
control
request
is
accepted.
active. 3.5 million hit points with the damage control. Impressive. And you can do something like this with the reactive armor hardener against drones and lasers and railguns. You can also do a build that focuses on armor volume. This works really well if you have a Logi at your side, basically a build for a fleet. And let's add something in the thermal circulation implant to give this boat a bit more tank. You can easily add like a bunch of armor plate units that will basically give you about 24% extra armor per armor plate, and in results that increases your armor even more, which adds even more tank. Makes the apocalypse even chunkier, but it does affect the mobility, so you have to keep that in mind. Alright, let's undock and let's see how this big boat looks with the stats active when we have a build like this on this thing. We'll have to do a 1v1 with the Abaddon just to see how it will work, although that 1v1 will last years because both ships are really tanky. Laser versus laser on armor is going to take a while, that's for sure. 1.2 million hit points, 90, 92, 92 and 92, 107,000 armor hit points, and the damage control can be activated. 3.6 million, 97% resistance on all damage types, lovely. And this lasts 23 seconds, enough to fully repair your armor multiple times if you have a proper logi and if you are in a proper fleet. So far, pretty impressive. Okay, now this was the more expensive build, and I know that a lot of you guys don't have ISK to do something like this, so I'll show you the cheaper option, and you'll be quite shocked when you see the difference in the total tank. The difference is ridiculously minimal. Now here are the base stats when everything is basically removed. So I will cover the resistance holes, although not really accurate to describe them as holes because it still has a lot of resistance. But let's cover the missing. Let's say let's call them the missing resistance points on the arm. So one anti-thermal, anti-kinetic, and one anti-explosive. This is basically one of the options, but you can basically add whatever armor combo you like. You can focus on active tanking or passive tanking. That also depends on how you like to build this ship. But I like to have resistance, and honestly, couple percent difference. But the difference in ISK is enormous.
Undocking.
So let's undock and let's see the active stats. The active stats on the Navy with a build like this. So 1.2 million hit points, very little difference, 90, 92, 91 and 90%. Well, as I mentioned before, you still have a crazy tank, but the build doesn't cost much, so yeah, you can easily do something like this, but with the integrations you get 1 or 2 more percent. However, it costs like extra 10-20 billion ISK, so yeah, that's the difference, and a build like this is still going to get the job done. So honestly, it really depends on the wallet situation in the game. If you can afford the integrations, they work well, but if you can't, something like this also works really well. 3.6 million hit points with the damage roll active, 97% resistances, which is literally the same as with the integrations.
Docking request accepted.
Very interesting result indeed. Okay, so that was the tank part. Let's have some fun with the DPS now. So a lot of you guys like your apocalypse with DPS, so that's what we are going to do now. Triple burst adapters is the way to go, although you can also increase the range if you like. You can also improve the power usage. We have again a lot of options, but for maximum DPS, triple burst or dual burst in one collision is going to work really well. And now I have 2.1 thousand DPS. This is without modules, and this will be a glass PvP build. Now I say glass. Even with a build like this, that's supposedly glass, you still have tank like you have 2 or 3 adaptives active. Now you can keep the thermal circulation because you still have some pretty good DPS. However, let's undock and let me actually show the active stats. Ironically,
Undocking.
the glass build on this thing is still chunky. It's still a brick. So the Navy ships really offer a very interesting way to build them, because you can do something like this, have DPS, and you can also have tank. And let's be real, not many ships can tank one of these things when they start shooting them. 464,000 hit points, 83, 78, 75, and 73%. I mean, yeah, it is still tanky. It is probably the tankiest glass build that I've had so far. Honestly, pretty impressive. Now, you also have the damage control, the panic button, the 23-second panic button. 1.3 million hit points. Yeah, this is definitely the tankiest glass build that I've ever done, I think. And this is with only one adaptive. Of course, the thermocirculation acts like a passive adaptive, but you can also add like 2 adaptives or 3 adaptives if you like, depending on the situation. However, in most cases, you don't really need to do that because this thing is, well, tanky by default. 4.3 thousand DPS in siege modes with the first heatsink. It's 4.9 thousand DPS with the second one. It's 5.5 thousand DPS with the third one. It's 5.9 thousand DPS with the thermal circulation, not even a laser implant. So yeah, it still has really good DPS while also retaining a really good tank. Definitely a very interesting way to fly this ship. I think I've never done something like this so far. Usually I do match the DPS
Docking
implant,
request
but
accepted.
since these Navy ships are so unique, you can literally do something like this on them and it will still work flawlessly. Okay, now let me do something silly. Now you can basically add the heatsink units on any implant, including the thermal circulation, so you can actually improve your DPS even more, and that's exactly what I just did here. So let's unlock and let's see how the DPS will work now when the
Undocking.
general units are applied. So you increased your armor and you can also increase your DPS with the units on the thermal circulation. Okay, well, let's quickly enter siege mode and let's take a look at the DPS. 4,446.53. Okay, a small improvement, passively of course. I expect that the DPS will go over 6,000, which honestly is still pretty good. The macro warp drive speed is 968.41 meters per second, which is still pretty solid. After all, this is not the fastest, but it does get the job done. 5.4 thousand DPS with the first one. With the second one is 6.4 thousand, and with the third one is 7,023.63. So I increased the DPS by about 2,000 just by adding the general units on the thermal circulation implant. Honestly, pretty impressive. Has a good tank, has good DPS, and they should get the job done. This is almost about the same DPS as my Macariel gets with the barrage implant, which is definitely not as tanky as this. So definitely very interesting boat. Alright, now you can also add the proper DPS implant with the pulse crystal, but if you add the pulse crystal, you basically lose DPS, or you basically lose the tank. But you will gain a lot of extra DPS. The pulse crystal is good for PvP. Basically, you warp in, you click on the implant, you kill the target, and warp out. For short fights, for hit and run operations, for low sec hunting, even for null sec, it can work really, really well. Okay, well, let's take a look at. Now I did gain some extra, a little bit extra cold DPS there. Enter the siege mode, and now 4,081.75. Again, a pretty good increase. 8.4 thousand DPS with the first with the implant active. With the first heatsink, it's 10,379. With the second one, it's 12,273, and with the third one, it is 13,342.35 DPS. Pretty good, pretty good. And yeah, you will still retain the same tank, which is honestly, as I already mentioned before, pretty impressive. And this separates these ships from the other battleships because you get tank and you get DPS. Now this is a PvE build for high sec, and well, the good old beam lasers have been installed, a scrambler, webs and a painter, one armor repair, dual strike computers and triple heat sinks. And it will be fun to see how this will do. Now this is exclusively a sniper, and with a build like this you use the focus crystal, but the focus crystal can also get the job done. But if you're using the pulse crystal, replace one or two heat sinks for batteries because you want to enhance the capacitor runtime so that you can keep the high DPS rolling, because with the pulse crystal, the lower your capacitor is, the less damage you will do.
Autopilot engaged.
So, time to run a laboratory mission. The laboratory missions have recently been changed. They basically added the Cyan carrier spawn sometimes. And well, this is a 5 million ISK mission, so there's a chance that a Cyan will spawn, but you'll find that out very soon, I guess. So, how is this boat going to perform against the Apocalypse Strike? The DPS between these two ships is very similar. I don't want to say the same. I think I feel like the Navy does have a little bit more DPS, about 1,000 more DPS, I would say, but it is kind of difficult to compare them because the focus crystal has been nerfed, like, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times by now. Yeah, the focus crystal has been nerfed like 5 times by now. The Apocalypse used to roll 45,000 DPS with the focus crystal. Now it's about 12, 13, 14,000. And of course, I don't have an nanocore on this ship. If you have an nanocore for the Apocalypse, you will probably have more DPS than I have right now, so nanocore definitely does improve the DPS. And I guess about 15,000 DPS would be the average number of the Apocalypse Striker. So yeah, I don't have a nanocore just because I wanted to fly the ship without this, just to see how it will work, how it will perform. And so far, I'm honestly quite happy with the Navy's performance. Now, the main thing about the Navy battleships is the tank. It's definitely the tank. The tank improvements is massive over the Strikers, as you could see throughout the last 4 Navy battleship videos that I did. The tankiest Navy is definitely the Raven. The second tankiest, I would say, goes to the Apocalypse Navy. Now, you will find me calling these ships Marauders, basically, because of their similarities. Of course, they're missing the Bastion module. They're basically missing the extra armor or extra shield boost performance, and they might actually add a special module for the Navy battleships at one point. I mean, there's a good chance that they just might do that. There's also a good chance that they will add the actual Marauders as special battleships, basically around the same thing that they did with the previous special cruisers. They might just add them like that, basically special ships, and that's going to be, I would most likely be okay with that. Although we have the classic strikers, and at this point, I don't know if me giving these ships the Marauder nicknames is actually the way to go, because it might cause confusion, especially if they end up adding the actual Marauders as special ships, which I would actually find that quite interesting, honestly. 2,343 DPS with the focus crystal maxed out. Not bad, pretty good. So, the Marauders. Now,
We're
this
under
thing
attack.
does look almost identical to the Paladin, although the Paladin has, different. It has some add-ons on the whole. It's not exactly the same,
We're
but the
under
color is
attack.
about accurate. So that would be the only difference. And since the developers did say that they would add more special ships in the future, Marauders are definitely not off the list. Now I remember, if I'm not mistaken, last time they talked about adding some new destroyers and some new frigates, new special edition frigates and destroyers. So I would say that's the next thing that will be added, and after that we will see what they will do. Perhaps the Marauders, I don't know. Although the Navy ships and the Navy battleships right now are really good, and I did have a lot of. Actually, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I did have the chance to shoot at like 5 of them, and honestly, they do live up to their name. They're tanky. Like, you can't use the same build that you usually do against the average battleship, because a properly built Navy battleship is easily and effortlessly going to tank a glass DPS build. Now, my recommendation, if you're trying to engage one of these ships, well, I would play it safe. Take a tank build, basically a tank versus tank, because you have a higher chance to survive, and if you have a good build, again, you also have a good chance to win the battle. Why I don't prefer and why I don't really recommend it to engage the Navy ships with a glass build is just because how tanky they are. Like I mentioned, they can easily tank the glass deep. If you're in a fleet, then I would say it is doable with a glass DPS. But if you are solo, then yeah, it will be a long fight, or if you don't have stabs, you might lose your ship very easily. And throughout my encounter, let's call them encounters, with my encounters with the Navy ships, I destroyed 2 with the Revelation, and they were really
Enemy
tanky.
ships
Even the
detected.
Revelation kind of struggled with the tank on these things. And
We're
I had the
under
chance to shoot at
attack.
3 or 4 of them with the Macariel. Now,
We're under attack.
if I were using
We're under attack.
a glass DPS build, things would have probably things would probably end slightly different. But thankfully, that wasn't the case. At least for now, we will see what will happen in the future. I don't really have a adequate, I would say, counter to the Navy battleships. I'll have to build a new one, actually. Most likely a Balgorn would be a good counter to one of these ships. I really haven't tested that out myself, or a fleet. They're very tough ships to counter, and I think that's one of their main selling points, really. So the classic DPS is definitely, I mean, it does work for the vast majority of ships, but if you are encountering the navies, then yeah, you should be very careful. I mean, most of them will probably have the normal average build that you find on other ships, but the small percentage of navies that actually have a very tanky build, they might be a problem. And knowing my luck, I will stumble upon one of them. I can bet that I'll stumble upon one of them, or two of them, at one point. Well, actually, I already did stumble upon one when I was shooting at the Raven Navy with the Revelation. It wasn't even full tank. It wasn't even full tank, and it took like 2 minutes for me to destroy it. That's just how tanky it is. It's insane. It's ridiculous how tanky they are. So the mission is progressing quite nicely so far. No issues with the tracking, no issues with the implant. 120% is the maximum charge. It used to be 200. And I believe that nerfing the implants is definitely the way to go. I wish that more implants were nerfed. And as time goes on, and as time goes on, I definitely can say that
detected.
the vast majority of
We're
implants
under
was reworked. Now, of course,
We're under
we have
attack.
the bombard tactic, which is still by far one of the most overpowered implants in game.
under
One of the only implants that hasn't really been changed much ever since release. It only got buffed. It only got buffed when they added the remote reload. But the alpha damage, the DPS that we can get from the implant remains the same. Even on level 15, you get like 150% extra damage from the implant, which is insane. So yeah, that's one problem that's currently ongoing that has to be fixed. And I know that the developers know about that. I know that they watch these videos. I know that they do. I like have confirmation on that, so yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, it will be fun to see what they do next. And well, the anniversary of the game is coming around the corner, which makes me interested to see and to know what they have in store for us. Besides, I feel like, you know, I feel like there is a surprise waiting for us, honestly. Like, when I say surprise, I mean there is something that they are not telling us, and I would say rightfully so, because each time the developers give us something ahead of time, like a month ahead of time, it gets leaked the second they post it on the Discord. So yeah, can't really blame them for not sharing anything with us when it gets leaked, when, you know, that just happens. Like, non-disclosure agreements, like, 2 of us are actually just following it. I believe the vast majority just doesn't care, like, and that's very sad. That's one of the big reasons why some things are as bad as they seem. And that's why the developers don't share stuff with us ahead of time that often anymore, because when they do, it gets leaked. But, you know, that will not stop me from potentially guessing what they might add. Now, there was a talk a long time ago about a new region being opened. No, I'm not talking about sleepers. I'm talking about the new region. Potentially Yangyun, potentially they might change how the wormholes work. We will see. I don't know. that's still up to debate. Could be a big surprise update coming on August, on the anniversary. I mean, we know Titans are coming, so that's one surprise. What's actually in store for us for July, I have no idea. I haven't looked at the Terrell roadmap in a while, actually, because just didn't have time, and the roadmap for this year was clumsily assembled. I don't know why, but that's just how it feels like. And yes, you can expect me to record all the Titans. I'll be doing the Titan videos as well. Don't worry, I will do it. I will show you how the ships work, how the ships look, how they fly, and I will show you all the doomsday effects. I was quite surprised at how many players were interested in the super capitals. I mean, I can see why they're interested in them. They're huge ships, huge expansive ships, and they're very interesting, very special as well. So it will be interesting to see how the Titans will work and how they perform.
We're under attack.
And there is no Cian carrier. Okay, that's actually good. Well then, the Cian carrier did not spawn, which means let's just destroy the remaining 28 ships. So far, it's been a pretty chill run, I must admit. And how does the Navy Apocalypse actually compare to the Striker? Well, if you have the Striker and if you have good skills for it, then I would say it does feel about the same. But again, the Navy does feel like it does a little bit more damage, and the Navy is definitely much more tanky. So the tank is definitely the main reason why you will want to fly this ship over the Striker. But if you already have the Striker, you can keep flying it. I mean, both ships do get the job done. However, the Navy is just much tankier. It's a floating brick, and that is the main thing about this boat. That's based on. It's actually applicable and applicable to the previous 3 Navy ships. They all feel roughly, I don't want to say the same, because they're different ships, of course, but when you compare them with their normal Striker counterpart, they do feel like they do feel similar, honestly. But the main selling point on these ships is the tank, and you can do some very nice and nasty surprises to pirates if you're flying these ships, because most pirates out there have a glass DPS build, and you can easily get some pretty good kills if you're careful. If you are basically prepared for pirates, you can surprise them and basically get some pretty good kills. After all, with the pulse lasers you get really good tracking, and triple webs and a scrambler will make sure that anything that gets close will get stopped. I mean, triple webs and a scrambler basically makes ships go full stop mode. Basically they just stop flying, and then you can slap them with the pulse lasers because they have some very good tracking. However, the price. This is something that I almost forgot. I was thinking, what did I forget to talk about? I forgot to talk about the price of these ships. Right now, the average kill mail on these ships is about 14-15 billion. The ones that I killed were like 14-15 billion. So they are definitely tasty kills. They are expensive. On the market they're about 6 billion, 6.5 billion, which is 1.4, which is about 3.5-4 times more expensive than a classic striker battleship. Honestly, I would say that's a pretty fair price for those of you who are building these ships. This is definitely a nice opportunity to get some ease, because it is quite rewarding to build them. The materials that are required are there basically, and it will keep the industry flowing. I know some of my friends right now are building super capital shipyards and they are rolling in ISK. It's kind of funny, honestly, when you think about it. Right now, as of me recording this video, actually I'll have to double check that. I remember some of my friends telling me that they are making a lot of ISK from industry now. I did actually skill into industry, but I haven't built anything yet because I was just always busy with PvP. However, exploration was also buffed, and I do get some very nice stuff from exploration, so I think I might start building stuff very soon, just to experience that aspect. I also heard some rumors about them doing something with industry again. Someone told me like they might reduce the price of the raw ISK that you are required to put in to manufacture something, that will be reduced. Although that's just a rumor, no solid evidence on that, but that's what I've heard, and I'll definitely I'll definitely pay close attention to what happens with that. Alright, well, back to the apocalypse here. I got carried away as usual. This is the last ship of the wave here, and this is the last ship of the mission. Well done. The Apocalypse Navy is definitely a well-performing ship. It is a very fun to fly ship so far, from what I've seen and from what I've experienced. It is also definitely very unique, and it does indeed feel like the Paladin in a lot of ways, but at the same time it also has its own personality that I do like. Alright, well, that will be it for the Apocalypse Navy. Definitely, again, a very fun to fly ship, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments below. And if you want to support me, and if you want to see more, feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out a lot. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.